Okay, I'm going to record here based on this screen instead of the actual slideshow screen because this is the third attempt I've made and it's really starting to irritate me. So I just need to see that it is recording, and it is. I also apologize. This is not my PowerPoint. This is the publisher, Pearson Publishing, for the text Organized Crime by Lyman and Potter. I tried to embed different links like I normally do with our PowerPoint, but because it is copyrighted and stuff, even though I had hit the edited screen, it didn't save my links. So your links are included in your Blackboard lesson plan. So please refer to the links there. So this is a straight lecture off this PowerPoint. So I'm going to start. So we talk about the early drug regulations, and I had mentioned previously that there were no controls over food, manufacturing, production, packaging, sales, both for food and for drugs. You would buy something and not know what was in it. Take, for example, and I told you this little anecdote before, that Teddy Roosevelt, the president at the time, was having breakfast at the White House and he was eating eggs and sausage. During that time, he was also reading a book by the name The Jungle, written by Upton St. Clair, which exposed the slaughterhouse and meatpacking industry in Chicago and the Midwest and focused on the unsanitary and, quite frankly, disgusting conditions that people had to work under, as well as the unsanitary and unsafe conditions that food and meat were processed and packaged in. He read a portion about a number of the workers falling into these meat grinding vats or losing fingers and limbs that were ground up and put into the meat products itself. So he was quite horrified by it. It was instrumental in getting the passage in the Food and Drug Act. So in a sense, what you got to remember of the 1906 Food and Drug Act is that it mandated inspection of meat products and forbid the sales, manufacturing, or transportation of poisonous patent medicines and unadulterated food products. The Food and Drug Act is the first of more than 200 federal laws that constitute one of the world's most inclusive and operative networks of consumer protection and public health concerns. Its purpose is to protect the American public from products identified as healthy without a scientific basis for that support. It's an act aimed to protect against the adulteration of food, even though we adulterate our food now. It's kind of a little hypocritical, I guess, but aimed at the, unhealthy adulteration of food. The act is implemented to curb the spread of disease and food-induced illnesses. The Food and Drug Act, its initial purpose was to clean up the American food and drug industry. At the turn of the 20th century, America's food supply was enshrouded in unsafe and unsanitary, disgusting practices. Disease was rampant, in the American slaughter and packing houses were not regulated, checked for sanitation purposes. At the time, there were no laws permitting the government to inspect these food packing and slaughterhouses and processing plants. So as a result, you had filthy sanitation, and people were getting sick. They were dying from unsafe food and medicines. So as a result, you had the Pure Food and Drug Act, a number of different laws since then, but I think if you're going to think of anything, it's not only maintaining sanitary working conditions, but it's also the labeling of all ingredients that go into both food and medicines. There was no controls on that. You didn't know what you were getting. So the Pure Food and Drug Act was a way of regulating and controlling the food and medicine industry. Up until the early 1900s, the foundational compounds for any medicine that you would buy or be prescribed was based on opium, cocaine, sometimes cannabis, with a mixture of wine, saffron, cloves to make it taste better. And that was your basic medicine that you would buy. Opium's been around and used for thousands upon thousands of years. We've got written evidence that it was used initially in India and kind of the Pakistani areas by early man. And then with the spread of trade and business, it ended up with the traders, Arab traders, going to Asia and trading with Asian countries. Opium, with the opium poppy, it spread to those countries, and they also used it. So we've got written documentation that opium has been one of the first of three compounds used in early man. Cocaine was indigenous to South America, and it grows a little bit over in Indonesia, but it's not as effective. So cocaine's pretty much confined to South America, particularly Peru, Bolivia, and southern parts of Colombia. There is a strain that grows over in Brazil, but it's not as good. So South America had a lock on the cocaine, but that was also used for a basis for medicinal purposes by indigenous peoples living there. Cannabis, we know cannabis got its start again in the Mideast, but like the opium poppy, it's basically a type of weed, hence the name. It can grow just about anywhere from each pole and clear in the middle of the globe. So it's a survivalist plant, and it's illegal to possess an opium poppy. The poppy itself really has no medicinal value. Quite frankly, it's used for a number of different things, where if you go to Starbucks and buy your poppy seed bagel, that's basically what you're getting, is these seeds from the opium poppy. The plant doesn't have any analgesic or pain-killing value until the plant reaches maturity, and it's only the sap itself that comes from the plant that contains a number of different alkaloids, with opium being one. It's 20-some alkaloids contained in this syrupy sap that has any medicinal or analgesic value to it. So you have your opium poppy farmer either in the Golden Crescent, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, who grows acres and acres of this stuff. When the plant reaches maturity and right before it tips over to spread its seeds, the farmer will have his workers go out, or he himself, his family, and they'll take a knife and score the bulb at the end of the flower. Sap will leak out. The minute it hits air, it congeals and solidifies. Next day, the farmer will come out, scrape the sap off into a knife, and wipe it on a burlap bag until he has enough sap to form about a 2-pound ball. And that's rolled up in burlap and ultimately transported to a processing center where it becomes an actual opium paste. It's very similar to roofing tar. It's fairly pliable, but it's a little bit more solidified. That was used for your medicinal purposes, to be smoked, to be eaten, and it does have a analgesic, pain-killing value to it. It's highly addictive. It was one of the principal pain-killing drugs used at near the end of the Civil War, where you had a number of soldiers that were wounded and were about ready to have a limb amputated, and they were given opium, which helped relieve the pain during the seizure or the surgery. Fast forward to the Civil War, to the Spanish-American War, same thing. Now, you'll find a term called soldier's disease. As a result of these wounded soldiers getting opium-based analgesics, they became addicted to them. And during the withdrawal period, when they didn't have opium, they would go into the withdrawals, and that was called soldier's disease. Like I said earlier, opium was the base of any type of prescribed medicine during the 19th century. You had a number of law-abiding Americans that were addicted to it. So you had a huge population, not only soldiers from the wars, but women, mothers. It was used to prescribe as a painkiller for babies that were teething. It was used for women going through menstrual cramps. It was used for just about everything. So if you look in a medicine cabinet in the 19th century, you'll find a medicine called laudanum, which again is a wine base, opium, cocaine base product that was used extensively during this time. Now, because of the number of addicts that were running around at the turn of the century and going into the early 1900s, our national government recognized we had a problem. When you have people that are addicted to drugs, they become unproductive. They don't want to work, they want to get high, or they can't concentrate enough to do anything productive because they're always looking to get that next fix. So the government recognized we have a problem. So with the onset of the Pure Food and Drug Act, labeling the ingredients of these foods and medicines, we have your Harrison Narcotics Act, which was kind of a global initiative at the time, because it wasn't just this country, it was a number of different countries that were experiencing the same problems that the United States was. I mean, that was the typical medicine that that was prescribed worldwide. So we started what we called our Harrison Narcotics Act to help curtail the prescribing and the use of opium-based medicines. And what that did was, in a sense, force the dispensers and manufacturers to pay a tax on the use and the prescription of opium-based, cocaine-based products. Coca-Cola used cocaine as a principal ingredient, hence the name Coca, because it came from Coca, the Coca plant. They switched to caffeine as a result of the Harrison Narcotics Act. You have doctors having to pay a tax for prescribing this type of medicine. You had pharmacists that had to pay a tax on filling these prescriptions and selling them to the general public. The general public it wasn't really directed towards the general public and the consumption of it. It was basically directed towards the manufacturers and the dispensers of these types of medicines. So that helped curtail, because other medicines obviously were being discovered and manufactured. So it did curtail a lot of that heavy narcotic use that was pretty prevalent in our country. So it wasn't until the 1940s and 50s, following World War II, where you find marijuana, cocaine starting to gain popularity, particularly in the entertainment and the music scene, where we start having additional problems that manifested themselves up through the 60s and throughout today, because we were finding different derivatives of a lot of these foundational drugs that are currently being used. There's a huge impact on the use of drugs, though. You call it a cycle of disorder. And we find where, particularly the inner city, but even in suburbia here, you find areas that, neighborhoods that start to go under, where you have absentee landlords, you've got people that have no stake in living or owning property in a particular area, and let the properties go into disrepair. Maintenance needs to be done. Things aren't being fixed. You're finding graffiti becomes prevalent. With that, usually you'll find a criminal element starting to associate themselves. The values of properties go down. Drug dealing becomes pretty visible and rampant. Violence associated with drug usage and drug sales, that starts taking over. Other crimes associated with that, like prostitution, become more visible. So it's a domino effect, and you call it the cycle of disorder. And Most people that live in neighborhoods want to take pride in their properties, but once that happens, you need a concentrated effort to eradicate that. We have both formal and informal controls to help alleviate that. We have code enforcement, that is a city city department that ensures that neighborhoods don't get too bad. If they become a public nuisance, a public safety, a city can go in and abate the property. Same thing with the county, where the landowner or the owner of the property or business is put on notice that if they don't clean it up, their property business is subject to seizure, and it can be sold in at an auction. So there's a number of different ways that we look at this, but just policing alone is not an easy task. So we need a number of different controls besides strictly law enforcement. We know that drug usage and drug sales attracts violence. You call it intramural violence, where you have violence directed at drug traffickers, vying for turf, vying for sales in the different area, controlling a monopoly. It's one of the hallmarks of organized crime. You also have intramural violence, where you have drug dealers versus the police, and the violence associated with enforcement. When we talk about drugs and organized crime, your drug trafficking organizations, you have core organizations that may control the entire process of drugs, from production or manufacturing to transportation to warehousing, storage, and then finally distribution. Or you may have a core organization that relies on another level, which is called your secondary organizations, where they may be contracted out to either produce the product, to transport it, to store it, to sell it. They will work hand in hand with your core organization. And then you have the local organization itself that ends up, could be strictly sales, your street dealer, mid-level dealer, that type of thing. They could be independent, contracted, or again, they may be a part of that core organized group. I pretty much talked about that. And one thing I noticed in the book, though, they're really concentrated on the mafia, the Italian mafia. The mafia doesn't control drugs anymore like they used to. You have different core organizations. You got your Mexican cartels. You got your South American cartels. You have your huge drug operations in Russia, in the Mideast. So, I mean, it's not controlled by the mafia. They still have an interest in it. But you have independent organizations that's all they do. They make their money that way, and then they launder it through legitimate enterprise. So it's I don't so much agree with the way the book is written from there. But you have your organized crime groups, the manufacturers, obviously, refiners, wholesalers, and then ultimately your distributors. We talk about the Calle cartel and other groups. If you want to break it down, you get down into that local organization where street dealers themselves can use children, young people to act as lookouts that sooner or later will get into the drug business themselves as they grow older. So, I mean, it follows a real chain. There's a hierarchy to this whole thing. It's a cold, calculating, violent business, very similar to your prostitution-related activity. It's money-driven. There's huge profits to be gained by it, but in order to make a profit and succeed, you have to operate 7 days a week all year long. I kind of gave a history of the opium poppy earlier, and you've got three principal areas right now where globally the world does rely on opium production. We talked about the Golden Crescent, consists of the countries of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran. Interesting enough, Afghanistan doesn't have a huge heroin or opium problem. They grow it. But because they have such strong religious values based on Islam, the drug is used basically to support families and farmers, and it's then transported, shipped over to other areas into Pakistan and Iran, where it's finally processed into opium or heroin. Iran has got a huge addiction problem, which is kind of hypocritical to their religion. In the Far East, you got the Golden Triangle, consisting mainly of countries of Burma or Myanmar, also Thailand and Laos, and parts of Vietnam. So these are all areas that produce the vast majority of the heroin. Here in California, in the southwestern United States, we get the vast majority of our heroin through Mexico. So Mexico does produce quite a bit of heroin and grows opium poppy. Again, talking about Southwest Asia, the Golden Crescent, interesting enough, produces the vast majority of the heroin that's consumed worldwide, and they average on the about 9,000 total tons of opium yearly. So they had a slight dip in that when the Taliban was in control of Afghanistan, but with the advent of the invasion, they lost control when we moved in, and as a consequence, we ended up reinstituting the poppy cultivation again, and they're back in business. So Afghanistan definitely relies on opium production. Now, your organizational or your organized drug trafficking scheme usually consists of either a vertical integrated, where you've got the drug manufacturing organization merges with an organization proficient in street level distribution. So let's say you've got your Mexican cartels and they're transporting drugs up into the United States. In order for those drugs to be sold in the United States, they have to reach a contract or a compact, if you will, with whatever gang or organized criminal element is in control of this area. Now, here you're talking about the Mexican mafia. Up Northern California and the West are familiar. So you'll have a integrated vertical hierarchy, if you will, where you have your core organization of the cartel, South American cartel, Mexican cartel, and reaching an agreement or a contract with the Mexican mafia to be allowed to come in and sell their product. So that's your vertical integration. Or you'll have a horizontal one where the core group will go in and either buy out or absorb the local crime network in order to distribute it. Now, a lot of our domestic organizations will cultivate, produce other illegal drugs. Right now, California and Canada are selling the best marijuana that is currently out there. We're renowned for our Sensimilla style of marijuana, and it surpasses Mexican marijuana now, as well as Hawaiian and Southeast Asian marijuana. So we have that dubious distinction of having the best pot that's grown worldwide. A lot of your organized or outlaw motorcycle groups, they're big in PCP, which is a drug. It's a type of stimulant, hallucinogenic, that was very popular in the 80s, and has made a little bit of a comeback, but not much. You've got too many other pharmaceuticals out there. But the manufacturing of LSD, a lot of your synthetic drug manufacturing is done up here in the United States. Now we talk about, how do we control the drugs? I mean, we've been fighting this so-called war on drugs since the Nixon administration back in the late 60s, early 70s. And we know, like we said before, that there's violence associated with drug uses or illegal drug usage. So we've had a number of strategies, and quite frankly, the United States has pretty much employed every one of these that I'm going to name. So you've got a strategy called expressive law enforcement. And that is, we need more police to saturate these areas to address the drug problem. The problem with that type of strategy alone is that we don't have the resources to totally saturate an area that has a drug problem. That's not the only crime that exists in the United States, and so we have to be receptive to that idea that we have to spread our personnel and resources judiciously. But the first one is to kind of saturate or develop a strategy that's what you're going to go after. Looking at Mr. Big, that's taking off your principal dealer or the person that's in control of an organization. Problem is with that strategy, we've done that, and we find that there's always somebody that's going to fill that vacuum once you take that person off. So it does create a problem for a while, but it does not end the overall drug operation. I'm sorry, let's see. Gang control, strategy 3. We have used this extensively regionally, locally, where we know that gangs rely on illegal drug sales and drug usage to finance their operations. They work heavily in concert with your core groups and organized crime. They control the local neighborhood, so they're employed to sell the product. There's a lot of violence associated with gangs and controlling their drug involvement. But nevertheless, that alone is not a strategy that's going to win this war. Going out and looking at street level drugs, that's kind of a dime a dozen. That's like putting your finger in the dike. As you take off one guy, you got 10 guys behind them that are going to be dealing, or they'll just move to another area of the city. So that doesn't completely work either. Neighborhood crackdowns. Okay, we employ community policing. That's a concept that's been around for 25 years. And we know that police can't solve this problem by themselves. So as a result, we employ other groups in the city as well as the community to help offset the problem. It adds manpower, but you also list the community involvement to help eradicate the problem. Going after the user, drug prevention. We've got rehab centers, we got different programs that people can go and get help. So they're out there, and they're marginally effective. Crop control, well, we've definitely have employed and deployed American personnel to the source of these drugs. I mean, we have a large contingent of DEA and law enforcement that were operating in and out of Afghanistan when we were heavily involved with the war there. We've tried crop eradication in Mexico by spraying the opium poppy areas with pesticide and plant killers. So we've gone after the source of the country. The problem is with that strategy, though, is you're totally dependent on the cooperation of the government. And unfortunately, governments can be corrupted. There's a lot of money involved. They're paid off by these drug organizations, these drug dealers, and they don't do a very good job of owning up to their contract or treaty with the United States as to what they're going to do as far as drug eradication. Interdiction. We've got 12,000 miles of open coastline in the United States. It's impossible to completely patrol. We employ the U.S. Coast Guard that also has jurisdiction on drug intervention. We have certain uses of the military that will employ. You have Border Patrol. But quite frankly, it wasn't until 9/11 where we secured our borders. We had open borders up to that time. So anybody could come in, and your smugglers had a field day. Those smuggling routes are still open. It's a little bit harder for them to penetrate, but quite frankly, we still can't completely eradicate the smuggling of drugs into this country. So we do have this type of strategy, and it's worked probably the best that it ever has. But to this day, we really, it's not 100%. So drugs are still coming in. But we've employed all these strategies, and we continue to. Now, you have to look at it from a budgetary standpoint. It costs a lot of money to fight this war. We just recently had an election where, in order to address the overcrowded conditions in prisons, etc., we're reducing sentencing to misdemeanor offenses for nonviolent crimes, providing that the individual doesn't have a past history. And this is where drug usage, drug sales, drug smuggling is all going to come under that category of a nonviolent offense. So in a sense, it's going to be interesting to see how we address that drug problem. Again, it's part of the hypocrisy of our political agenda, and it forces law enforcement to address these issues when, in fact, we don't have the budget, manpower, or resources to do so. So stand by. We'll see what happens. So that's going to end the lecture on this lesson. Thank you.